thank you so much for coming to transforming a bestseller onto the silver screen, a book-to-film experience. First, can I just give everyone a round of applause? To start, for introductions, it's book to film, so I have a very silly question. I would like, could you say your name, your book, and your guilty pleasure movie? I can start. I will go first. I'm Hermione. My name is MJ Franklin. I'm an assistant editor at Mashable.com, and I help run our online book club called Mash Reads. So I don't have a book, but I write on the internet. Not very similar, but still writing. And my favorite guilty pleasure movie is a little movie called Bring It On. This panel is the poo, so take a big whiff. So that is poetry to tie it back into books.
That was great. I'm Steven, and I know Hermione, actually. I'm Steven Chbosky. I wrote the novel The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and I also directed that movie. Thank you. And I'm also here kind of in a special capacity because I also co-wrote the screenplay and directed the adaptation of Raquel's book Wonder, which comes out in November. So, and my guilty pleasure movie is a cult movie called The Room. If anyone, you are my rose.
I am RJ Palacio, Raquel, and I wrote Wonder, which has been turned into a movie that's coming out November 17th, directed by this wonderful gentleman. And it's so corny. I'm so embarrassed.
That's why this is a fun question.
I know. No, I can't. It's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Nicola Yoon. Hi. Thank you. You guys are awesome. I wrote Everything, and it's not a guilty pleasure. I mean, I own this. I love Harold and Kumar. It's my favorite.
I don't know. Is this on? Oh yeah, it is. Wow, amazing. Hi, I'm Lauren Oliver. I wrote Before I Fall, which was turned into a movie, and I would like to say it is a great honor to be on this panel. I have to say this first because Everything is one of my favorite books, and also a surprising connection with two people on this panel. Wonder, which is an extraordinary book, also features a character in it who is very important. He was with my mother, her romantic partner, for the past 10 years. He just passed away. And Mr. Brown, he was the real life John Brown, Mr. Brown. Yeah. And he was such an extraordinary man, and I'm just very grateful, and I wish he had lived to see the movie, but I'm glad I am going to hopefully live to see the movie too, till November. I also don't really have any guilty pleasure movies because I don't really have much guilt in my life, but my favorite three, this gives you a sense of my taste in movies, are Dazed and Confused, Love Actually, and of course, the quintessential best movie of all time, The Princess Bride.
All great books and all great movies, but we're here to talk about your book to movie specifically. So I guess my first question is a very general, amorphous. You have a book, it gets turned into a movie. When you find out, what's the first thing that goes through your head?
Online shopping. Just kidding.
I mean, I didn't really believe it. I just was like, no, come on. And then I drank an entire bottle of champagne.
What a wonderful way to celebrate.
Seriously, like we had one bottle in the house and then we drank it and then I was like, we have to buy another one. So then we did.
I definitely think the disbelief is a big thing because so many books get optioned, and not just optioned, but there are so many steps in the process. Like it's like making the world's largest souffle on an ocean of ever moving parts, many of whom have no morals, but I think that, but it lasted and it persists so long. So you're trained as an author to never believe it. But it lasted for so long that I was literally sitting at the premiere and I still didn't believe it. And then the characters started appearing on the screen and I was like, what the? I know them. Yeah.
When I first heard, it's not like it happens all at once, you know, it's not like there's a moment. It's like, you know, watching your kid take the first step. You know, they never take one first step. There's a series of first steps, and you never really miss the first moment. And it was like that for me with Wonder. You know, there was a chance that it was going to be turned. You know, there were just lots of little incremental steps leading up to that moment when I knew it was optioned. But it took 4 years before it got made. And so it wasn't, I guess I had that big, like, oh my goodness, it's going to be a movie, when I heard that Julia Roberts was going to play the mom. And that was the moment for me where I was like, oh my God, does that mean I get to meet Julia Roberts? Oh my God, this is actually going to happen, because if Julia Roberts wants to make the movie, they're going to make the movie. So that for me was my moment. And we were all like, my husband and I were just looking at each other like, oh my God, you know, that's all we could do. So it was pretty amazing.
Did you get to meet Julia Roberts?
Oh yeah. Yeah, oh yeah.
Was it
Honestly, relating back to your first question, I do think Pretty Woman as being like a source of like an inspirational life story for me for a long time. It's possibly, somebody should feel guilty about that. I'm not sure who.
Raquel did meet Julia Roberts. I made sure of it in this way. And I won't give away the ending, but in a climactic scene, let's say, I love to, when I direct, do Easter eggs. And so I put Julia Roberts, Owen Wilson, and the whole family in this row at a graduation, and right behind them, there is Raquel and Raquel's husband and sons. So both families are there side by side.
Oh.
Wow. Yeah. And you should know that I know for a fact that Julia was very nervous to meet Raquel, as much as Raquel was nervous to meet Julia.
I know, that's wild.
It's true.
So I guess my next question is, you find out that your book's being turned into a movie, what happens next, right? Like, there's so much lead up, you find out your book's being optioned. To make that movie happen, what happens next?
A souffle. No, I mean, it's funny though too, because I mean, I do think I think from what people said, everybody had different moments of understanding that it was real. Because I mean, even like at each step, you're getting closer. So if you are casting, by the time you're casting, you are getting closer, but also making a movie isn't exactly as linear as it sounds. So then if the one cast member who's seminal to it falls out, it could still not happen. So, I mean, really, you are trying to assemble, and the crazy thing about Hollywood to me, and people have always said this, is it's slow. So it took 7.5 years from Before I Fall to get made,
Wow.
and it got so close several times, and then it fell apart. But you really are trying to put together so many different moving parts and just slot them, and every so often it clicks. But it's not linear. You know?
What's happening during that 7.5 years?
Well, that's how long it takes people in Hollywood to read a book. No, I'm just kidding. No.
We can read much faster than that, right?
No.
BookCon?
But I mean, because you have to. But again, even that depends, because it depends on. So there's like producers who help make it. There's studios who have to finance it, but the studios may only finance it if it's certain directors attached. But the director may only want to work with certain actresses, or one actress may. You know what I mean? So like, there's so many things, and then the studio. In my case, the head of the studio was like, I will definitely make Before I Fall. And then she was like, and instead I'm going to make Fault in Our Stars, which was a wise decision on her part. But you know, and then so that falls out of option. And then, you know, I mean, it's always, but really it's all about relationships, networks, and fitting them together at the same time. It's just the right moment in the right way, you know.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's sort of a miracle that a movie gets made, because there are so many moving parts. But for me, like, the process was much shorter. So like, the book came out in September of 2015, and like the movie is out. So it's like a very short process. But there's just a lot of waiting, right? And hoping, like waiting to read the script, and then like give notes on the script and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, once it starts going though, it can go really fast.
Right. Yeah. So then again, it can pick up, but there are a lot of like the sort of miraculous things that have to happen. But I think Stephen said the last time we did this panel, like, you really just need good people who love the thing that they're making. Like, they have to really, really love it, because it's impossible odds if you don't love it.
Yes.
Right? That it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I would say with Wonder, the waiting was more about the producers really wanting, and everyone involved, really loving the material and really wanting to get it right. And to their credit, they wanted to keep it going, and what that means in terms of Wonder was first getting a script that was not 100%, but at least moving forward enough to get a studio to like the script enough to be able to say, okay, we're going to do this. And in this case, it was Lionsgate. And then once they had sort of a script that was a good starting point and they had a studio financing it, then it's a question of putting it together like a package. And I think in terms of Wonder, what happened really, now I know, is that they had wanted Steven to do it from the very beginning. And Steven wasn't available. He was doing things like Beauty and the Beast, or who knows, you
Very
know.
casual.
And so I think that they moved forward wanting very much to sort of do what was best for Wonder, and there were some false starts, and it wasn't really until Steven came on board a year ago, we first met, yeah. And then suddenly it was, as you just said, it just moved along at the speed of light, and suddenly we were filming and it was a movie, right? I mean, that's pretty much what happened.
That's, yeah, and I will say from a little bit from the inside that having made movies myself and had other screenplays that I wrote get made, it really is a small miracle, and there is no rhyme or reason, which is probably a good explanation about why so many movies are bad. And why it really is the package that has to come together. It's the right flavor at the right time. I can speak to this as an author, even though I made the movie. The reason why The Perks of Being a Wallflower was made when it was made was that Emma Watson met all the heads of the studios and said, I want you to make this movie. I want to do this movie. And she happened to meet with Summit at the time, now Lionsgate, Eric Feig, at the exact right time when one of their other movies fell apart for some reason, probably a casting thing. And they were going to Berlin, and they had to sell this many movies at the Berlin Film Festival, foreign rights. So it was like the right dinner with the right star at the right time, and we were going.
Yeah, I have to say, like, a good analogy is like, you write a book from, well, not everybody, but basically from page 1 to the end. But movies seem to me like as though you needed to have all of the pages already set up, and then you have to slot them together in the right order at the right time. Like, they're already kind of have to be there, though.
It's like a giant puzzle, but with lives and
Yes.
people and time.
Yes.
But with fate, yes.
It is what it is, but I will say also, here's the good news. By the way, how many authors are in the room? Fellow authors. Lovely. That's great. Here's the good news. It's a hell of a lot easier, and it happens a lot more often for books than it does for original screenplays. That I know from experience. So it really helps to have a fan base. It helps to have a following. It certainly helps to sell copies. And it helps to get interest from the things that really make the business go, which is the stars.
And Stephen kept on referring to the movie gods. I think a little bit of worship to the movie gods helped as well.
Yeah.
Blood sacrifice.
You
is
must,
what they mean, yeah.
you must bow to the movie gods, because the movie gods decide how good your movie is going to be.
Yeah.
You can do the best you can, but there it is.
Yeah.
This puzzle with fate and lives just got really intense.
Yeah.
It is. It's very intense.
Like, honestly, like, one of the reasons everything got made is because the head of MGM's daughter really likes the book. Like, seriously, it comes down to, like, sometimes that's just part of it, right? Like, she loved the book, and she, like, took it to her dad and was like, we should make this. And you're like, okay. So, like, I got to meet her, and I was like, thanks for making
Yeah,
a
but
movie.
and I think that's really important about both books and movies, because the movie industry, and to some extent this is good, and there are books for which this is true too. Some of it is kind of like formulaic, and there are movies and there are books that are a little bit like people are doing it for a reason, because they want to make money, because they want to make merchandise. But what makes great books and what makes great movies is that people are passionate about it, that they did it for the purpose of making that thing. That it wasn't a means to an end, that it was the end, and those are the only things that can ultimately be great, no matter what the artistic kind of context.
So I have a question for you, Stephen, actually. You have been on all sides of the table. You've written books, you've directed movies, your book's been turned into a movie. Number one, do you sleep? But then you also...
That's very fun. No, I have a 4 and a 2-year-old. I don't at all. It's really rough, man.
But then you also directed Wonder by Raquel, so you guys collaborated. What was that process like? What was it like being on the other side of the table? And Raquel, what was it like working with another a director who was also an author?
For me, I will speak, it was great, and I'll tell you why. When I did Perks, because it was so close to me, the book was so close, I felt the pressure of, I don't want to let the fans down, but I also don't, it was so personal to me, it was hard to see it objectively. It was a much more difficult process than Wonder. With Wonder, it was great because I had a sister that I could call and say, like, I can't tell you how many decisions I deferred. She didn't even know this. I'd say, hey, here's some end titles. When you make a movie, when you direct a movie, you basically make, I don't know how many decisions a day, 200 on set, whatever it is. You're always figuring out. They'll go, here are 5, like when you look at an end crawl and it goes at the end, they go, here are 5 fonts, pick one. And you go, I don't know anything about fonts. I don't, but it has to, every decision has to be right. So what was great, there were so many moments where I'd say, listen, I like both of these actors, what do you think? To Raquel. And she'd like, I like this one. Great, done. You know what I mean? They're your characters, lovely. You saw it, I got it close. Or what do you think about this one? Or what do you think about this? There's so many moments, or even as a screenwriter, where I would say, I knew that Raquel had done her own version of the script. Even as a way of giving notes, I would consult that, or I'd ask her, hey, I'm filming the scene, where Augie and Jack will have lunch. Do you have a version of the scene? And I would read it, and sometimes I'd be like, oh, I love that line. Let me put it here. And so, yeah, she was invaluable.
That's amazing, because so many times the writer shut out, and I have a question about that. I had a very good relationship with the director too, although I was like, yeah, can you make the decisions? Thanks. Like, my work was done. But do you feel that desire to collaborate comes from the fact that you're also a writer? Because
Absolutely, because I knew as an author, I was both the author and the director of Perks. So I knew what the author, all those details, there's a richness that you can't possibly, it's great to be the director because you can translate it. You can say, this is interesting to me more than this thing. Mm-hmm. So you're a little bit more objective, but there is a wealth of understanding about, here's a great example. Something I could never have done. It's something I did with Perks. So as a director, you might have, if you're lucky, you have an afternoon to rehearse with your actors, the way that the money works. So, okay, so in Perks I had 5 actors to be this family. I had them for 2 hours on a Sunday. So in order to get them all in the right frame of mind, I wrote the history of the Kalmekas family, 6-7 pages long. Here you go. This is how you got engaged. This is when you got married. These are your favorite foods. All these things to make it more specific. And I knew how valuable that was to the actors. I can't write the history of the Pullman family, but I can sure ask her to do it. And then I could give it to Julia Roberts and Owen Wilson and Isabella Vidovich and Jacob Tremblay, and it makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very rare for people in Hollywood to use the writer.
I know, and they're fools.
Yeah,
no,
I agree.
And interestingly enough, they the first draft of the movie, the script, that I never spoke to the screenwriter, and nor did I ever speak to the second screenwriter. So it wasn't until, and it's not like I loved either one of those scripts that much. It wasn't until Stephen came along and we had this great 3-hour dinner, and and he rewrote it, and then he sent it to me, and he was so collaborative, and he was like, what do you think about this? And I loved what he did. The things that Summer was the one, there were a couple of moments where I was like, well, what about, I'm not, maybe you could do this or whatever. And he was so open and so, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And he made me feel, he was like a parent, not even a brother. He was like my mom or dad. That's so, you're so good. Yeah. you write really well. Like Mr. Brown all over.
Yeah, no, I love it. I always say creative work is like romance. Like, you have to pick your partner wisely, because if you pick the wrong partner, no amount of technical proficiency will keep it from being anything other than lonely and alienating and a bad result.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's always sort of interesting, and I hear these stories, is that everyone always says that the writer is the least important person in Hollywood and stuff, or they get treated that way, and I don't understand it.
Well, I will say this from experience: the really smart directors, the best directors, it's not true.
Right.
Yeah.
And what happens is, and it kind of goes two ways, because the director is the king of the movie without question, or the queen, and so, but the author created the world. So if you have a reasonable and kind author and respectful author, and same with a director, then it's a match made in heaven. It's great because each understands their role. And each has a different level of expertise. But there are a lot of people, in Hollywood, in our business too, in publishing, where the ego is so big, or maybe the sense of territorial control is so intrinsic to the personality that it doesn't really gel. So when it's best is when everyone's reasonable and respectful. And in the case of Wonder, it really was a match made in heaven for us.
Yeah,
It's going to be so great.
It is going to be great. I mean, I got to give notes on the first versions of the script, and I was aware that it was a rare thing that I got to give notes. And it was so nice, and I spoke to the screenwriter. And then another way I got lucky is I really got along with the director. So we met for this 3-hour epic coffee at the beginning, and then realized we liked each other. Then she would call and ask questions, and then she did a version of the script too, like the shooting script. And I always talk about this, there was a point at which I read the script and there was a new scene and I wish I'd written it. It was it was not in the book and it was so good and I was like, oh my God, that is amazing. And
That's amazing, it's alchemy. Right. But I had a similar experience when, the director and I are close, the people who made the movie, financed it, we're close, we're actual friends. And I think that's really important, not like fake friends who are friendly so long as we're getting something from each other, but real friends. And in my first draft ever, Before I Fall, there was only one scene that I've been asked to cut in my life that I really regretted cutting. Let me be clear, I've cut many scenes from all of my books, and they were all deserved to be burned. But this was the only one that I felt regret for, and it was just, they felt it was too dark and too upsetting and whatever. I never told anybody about that, but it had specific personal resonance to me that I felt was important. Anyway, probably now I would have argued it, but I was at the start of my career. I never told anybody that who worked on the movie. We never discussed it. And the first time I ever saw it, I was alone in my hotel room like a weird freak, watching on my computer because I was so anxious about seeing it because it's a personal movie for me. And they had put the scene in, without ever knowing it. It wasn't even in the script, but they had felt intuitively in the cadence of the screen, the thing, they had restored the exact scene that I had never told them about. And I was alone in my hotel room. I started literally weeping, because I couldn't believe it. But that's the kind of alchemy of people who really understand. It's an act of co-creation, of symbiosis, instead of one of, kind of hierarchy and extraction,
It's funny that you say that because the one thing about a movie, especially if it takes 7 years, in the case of Perks it took 12, I think, is that you get a chance like that to make up. Because I would look at the book, and I'm very proud of my book, of course, but I was like, God, why did I make Charlie cry so much? That's so weird. Why did I do that? And then it was really nice to be able to do the movie and not have him cry so much. And there was one thing I asked RJ. I said, is there anything visual that, how do you see the world? So I was trying to, and she's like, well, I always thought that Augie would look at shoes a lot. Remember? Yeah. Which you didn't put in your book. I fell in love with this idea, and it's all over the movie about just him looking down and kind of figuring out people by their shoes. And it's a really great bit.
Well, that's also what's amazing when it works, because the language for film is similar, but of course, actually different. It has a different vocabulary. And that's why I'm writing screenplays now a little too, and I love it, because first of all, it forces me to strengthen all the parts of my craft, a word I hate, that are the weakest. But also because, writing down a lot of times he's looking at the shoes can actually on the page feel very repetitive, which is probably why you didn't do it. But when you see it visually, it communicates something immediately. So that I love.
So I guess my next question then is, you are making your book into a movie. You are now re-engaging with this work that you've created. What are the opportunities or challenges of retelling that story in a new medium? And how do you kind of approach them?
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to start off with actually Raquel first.
Wow, I get the hard one. Sorry. I think the most wonderful thing about movies, and in terms of the way they play away from the book, is that you're dealing with something that's an automatically visual element. It's got all this visual vocabulary. It's a visual world married to sound, which are the two things you don't have on a written page. You don't have lighting, and you don't have images, and you don't have sound. And so suddenly it's almost like you're freed to actually go into many different dimensions that you can't when you're writing. In writing, you have to use words to simulate those things. And so you're sort of limited to one kind of vocabulary. And so what I am looking forward to, because I'm actually sort of really now thinking about, as I told Stephen, I've been inspired by being on a movie set to want to actually go back to school and study directing and maybe, you know, do something like with that or something. But, oh, look at that.
And that is how truly creative people are. They're always learning.
Yeah.
The End by Lauren Oliver.
But I love the idea of telling a story with as many visual and audio elements as possible in a way that you can't when you're just your words on a page, and that would be really like a sensory experience, and I think it would be a challenge, not having over sensory experience, you know, not exploding with senses or whatever. I mean, in any case, I think it'll be a wonderful challenge for the future someday.
Does it make you approach writing your next novel differently, having been on a set? What about you, Nicola? Because you had everything, and when did you find out that the book was being turned into a movie?
Well, it was optioned right as the book came out, but I didn't really, and I think it was maybe a year later when they were like, oh, it's going to happen. I didn't actually believe it until I saw the call sheet, for the first day, and I was like, oh, they've hired people.
So then you find out, and then you write, The Sun is Also a Star.
Well, yeah, but yes, I mean, the thing about writing your second book while the first book is doing pretty well is that you hear all the stuff that people think about the first book, right? You know all the things they like about it, and you know all the things they hate about it because people will tell you, and neither thing is really that good for you, or for me anyway. It's not actually awesome to hear all the things that people love about it, because then the tendency is to say, oh, maybe I should do that again. And when you hear all the things they hate, you go, oh, well, maybe I should avoid it. And so while I was writing the second book, it took me a long time to learn to turn that down, in my own head, right? So I wasn't paying attention to what everyone else was saying, just writing the book that I wanted to write. And that I tried to speed that process up, but actually it just took time for me to get used to the new level of sort of being public, I guess, with your art. But to go back to your question before, I think one of the things I worried about for everything was there's so much texting in it, and there are those pictures, and there are all the drawings, and it's it has so many non-traditional elements. What I worried about for the movie was how they were going to do that, and make it interesting, because texting bubbles on the screen is really boring, right? In general, no one wants to be reading. And I just remember talking to the director, and she figured it out, and she did it in such a unique way. And my brain would not have come up with it, but I could write a text dialogue all day, but I wouldn't have thought to do what she did.
I have a very general question for the entire panel, which is, what do we readers not know about turning a book into a movie? I love all these pondering.
In what respect? That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, so there's so much that goes into it, and I think readers also form a relationship with the way you tell a story and the book itself. I think there's a lot of read the book first, watch the movie first. What is it that readers should know when they're approaching a movie that's been that came from a book, or the creation process?
I mean, there's a lot of different ways to answer that. Technically, and Stephen touched on this briefly, there's a lot of things in movies that there are decisions that have to be made, and they're made the way that they are because of budgetary and timeline concerns, which do not exist in movies. But one thing that I think is kind of amazing from an acting and directing perspective is that, of course, you're not filming a movie from beginning to end in the story. So if you have a setup in a scene and 5 different, there's one place, a dining room table, and the characters are there at 5 points in the movie at very different emotional times. And in the book, it's chapter 1, chapter 12, and chapter 22. Those things are getting filmed on the same day, those scenes. So you have to transition actors, which blew my mind, because in my book, the whole point is these dramatic emotional evolution of the character, but it meant that the actress had to film herself being basically who she was on day 1, and also 5 minutes later who she was on the last day. And that blows my mind. I think that's really fascinating. And also such a thing about the director, how they can draw that out of the actresses and actors.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I noticed is, well, one of the things readers should know is that it is a different piece of art, right? Like the best adaptations are not actually exactly like the book, right? I mean, what happens is the director and the writer, the screenwriter, and whoever will find a different way to tell the story that makes it new, but sort of keeps with the spirit. But I mean, the best thing you want is a new piece of art, right? About those characters that you love or about the situation that you love. So actually going into it saying you want exactly the book is to like sort of limit this new, piece of art that you could get from it. Yeah, and then the other thing that you should know is that it's a miracle that a movie gets made because it's crazy. It's crazy on that set.
I'll say this, that having done both, that something Raquel talked about, movies have all these tricks. It is music, and it has all these different ways, these invisible ways that you would blow your mind to know how you are being manipulated, and not in a bad way. It's not like selling toothpaste. It's not a commercial, but like if you take your favorite movie, I guarantee you the first time you watched it, you barely noticed the music. You barely noticed any of it. And if I mention like the Lord of the Rings, you may be able to hum 3 cues maybe at tops. There's music all the time happening. And all these invisible things. Chemistry between actors is this unspoken, unwritten, you couldn't predict it. And you have to sell a marriage with basically, I would take a very specific example with Wonder. Julia Roberts and Owen Wilson. I think a lot of people think Owen Wilson as the dad with Julia Roberts makes no sense. They're so great together you wouldn't believe it. Like 2 Southerners, they're both funny, they're both great people. So there's this thing, and what that union does, this invisible magic is happening that sells a marriage. It's all fiction. I heard a quote today earlier. My friend Aaron said it, which is I think it was Picasso said art is a great lie that tells the truth, that reveals the truth, something like that. And that's what it's like. All these invisible things happening that make you feel a certain way, because books have one thing that movies will never have, can never have, and that is the first-person narrative. The ability to go inside a character emotionally and reveal thoughts about perception. You can kind of fake it in a movie, and I've done it. I've done voiceover movies, but voiceover is different than being inside of character's mind. Even by the nature of casting the person, you're putting a very literal. Here, I'll put it this way. When I wrote The Perks of Being a Wallflower, the novel, I deliberately did not describe anybody physically. Why? Because I wanted to empower every reader to make up Charlie, Sam, Patrick, and all these characters so that they were subconsciously invested in what was going on. Okay? When you cast Emma Watson, Logan Lerman, Ezra Miller, you've taken that away. So what you have to do is find all these ways to do the same emotional thing, which is to empower the audience and to respect an audience's limit to what emotions you're going to go, what emotional places you're going to go into. Because this is why. If you're reading a book, you go, she writes this thing, and you go, oh, wow, I'm going to put that down, I'm going to think about that. Now, you can hit pause at home, but it's completely different. If you're in a movie theater, you have to respect an audience's ability to how much they can take emotionally. Because when you're in charge of it, you have to respect how to communicate to them the best way.
Can I just say, for the writers and even for the readers, one of the things that I'm so geeky on a craft, again, a word I hate, but now I've used twice, but I really do, and I assume so many, obviously everybody's here, they love books and so I would encourage all of you to look at how juxtaposition is used in movies and also in books, because I also have a company where we teach writers how to write and things like that, and one of the things we always say is, like, if you have a kiss on the page and then the character turns away and sees a stray cat dying on the street, it's going to feel different to the reader than if they have a kiss and then she turns away and sees like a beautiful balloon, right? And movies use it with music, they use it with other visuals, and just for craft reasons and even for readers, I think it's really important to start thinking of juxtaposition in both forms as a way. At least that's something that I've been focused more and more on.
So I have one last question, but then also, can we take audience questions too? Yes? No?
Yes.
Perfect. So I guess my last question.
I don't know if I have the authority to say that.
We
but
make
yes,
the rules
we should
in this
do that.
room. So my last question before opening it to the audience is Easter eggs. What secrets did you put in your movie? Or are you able to say, like, I want this Easter egg hiding here? And if so,
I could say a million of them, but I will be last.
It's not an Easter egg, but I have a cameo, like me and my little girl and my husband are like on the beach. I tell this story all the time, but where like Amanda Stenberg and Nick Robinson, who are the stars, are frolicking on the beach, and my husband and I are in the background with our little girl, like we're swinging her in the waves. And it goes by really fast. It's like 3 seconds, but it did take 45 minutes to film it because she's 5. And they filmed it with a drone camera, so the camera is flying by, and my little girl pointed at it every time.
You told me this story. It's
Every
so
single
funny.
take. Like, seriously, she would not stop. And they would do cut, reset, and I'm like, honey, don't point at the camera. 45 minutes.
That camera? Yeah.
So, but we did make it into the movie. So there, if you see it, then when they're in Hawaii, we are on the beach.
Stephen, as he said before, used us in several scenes. He used my older son the most, I think, because my older son turned 20 on the set and was perfectly, it was good for the high school scenes. And this was a surprise because, I knew he would use him as a background, an extra in some of the sort of the drama scenes with Via and Justin. But then one day, when my son didn't show up on set because we thought he was done, Stephen said, "Wait, Caleb's coming. He's coming tomorrow, right?" I'm like, "He wasn't going to come." He was like, "No, I want him to be in the next." It was really kind of great, and he's very featured, and I feel like he's got. We see him a lot. Yeah.
I had a vested interest in keeping his mother happy. You know what I mean? Yes, Easter eggs. I will say. Oh, you want to?
Yeah. What about you, Lauren?
Oh, no, I mean, all of my books are literally books are whole Easter eggs. I leave hints to myself about what I was going through so I can remember. So I don't, but those are secret.
Yes.
So.
Bum, bum, bum.
I'll say a few. These are fun. Most of them are about my wife, whom I love very much. And when you're starting on the clock and you find Augie on the bed, the clock is 11:11. Why? Because whenever she sees 11:11, she always thinks it's her mother who's passed away is thinking about her. So she always thinks of her mom. Or when Via's reading a book on the steps and Justin comes down, Via's reading my wife's book. She's also an author. So a lot of those. I will say one with my daughter, which was, when I was filming the movie in Vancouver last summer, I missed my daughter's 4th birthday, and my wife was here in New Jersey with her family and celebrating it. And what was great was I needed to do a flashback with little Via and Julia Roberts. I needed something, and I won't give it away why. You'll see it in the movie, I hope. And I needed a flashback, so I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to recreate my daughter's 4th birthday I missed. So that was pretty amazing to be able to have the one that I missed. And that is my ultimate Easter egg. It's my favorite part of the movie. It was very
Perks of
funny.
being the best person alive, clearly.
And the great thing was, this was a really funny story, I have to say, is that I sat there and I'm directing my little Macy, and I thought, and she did great, by the way, she was amazing. And Julia, after like 4 takes, she's like, I've never been your second favorite actor on set before, and I don't know if I like it, which is really funny. Which is pretty good.
So, guys, my next question is: are you trying to make us cry?
Not at all. Not at all.
Let's open up to audience questions.
So because your book's like a personal thing for you, how did you know that the story, like screenwriters, weren't gonna like ruin it?
I will say that you don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what you do is you put your faith in people. Like if you're lucky enough to choose some producers that you really think are doing their best to turn your book into a movie that's worthwhile, then you have to trust that they're going to hire the people who are going to bring it to life in a way that makes the most sense and is truest to the book. And it's a lot about, it's blind faith. It's like literally kind of jumping off the edge of a cliff, not being able to see the bottom,
Yeah. Well, and that's why you have to pick people who they really care about the book. I mean, because especially a producer who's responsible for finding the screenwriter, if it's somebody who cares and they care about it the same way you do, they see the same things, they are going to be as outraged by a script that ruins it as you are. You know what I mean? So
They really, really, really have to love it, like you love it.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
This question is for Stephen, but anybody could jump in and put their input. So I'm a college student and I'm studying screenwriting and directing, and I just wanted to know how many times is it for you to write through your own screenplay and get it to a good point that you're satisfied? Because I've been working on something for like since middle school,
Right.
and had to teach myself about, I'm still at this point.
Of course.
Where
How old are you?
I'm 19.
Okay, here you go. Here's my real advice to young writers, all young writers. What is maddening about being a writer is that you can recognize great writing before you can actually do it. And there's like this weird 5 to 10 year gap where you can read The Great Gatsby, you can read To Kill a Mockingbird, you can watch Taxi Driver, and you go, God, it's so goddamn good. And you try to do it and you go crazy. Here's the good news. It probably won't happen for you until you're like 25, okay? Meaning, I'm not saying that you won't write something beautiful before then, not at all. What I'm saying is you just keep at it. And the thing is that, here, oh God, you're a young writer. Tell you what, all young writers who want to hear a spiel, because I saw how many hands went up, it's not a whole lot of people, and I don't want to be mean to everybody else who's not so much interested in this. Any young writer who wants to hear a 4-point spiel that like has changed lives, you come to me after this, and I'll tell you the 4 steps that will really help you.
I want to know the 4 steps. I'm sitting here, Stephen. Like I need to. I need to.
You
know.
honestly want to hear the 4 steps?
I'm not kidding. I want to know.
Wow. All right. Here we go. Here are the 4 steps. Step number 1: write down every idea you have. Every idea. You can't game it, blah, 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 blah. Every idea. If it's one line, I want to write my version of The Goonies. I want to do my version of Taxi Driver. This is why it's important. Okay, so, all right, I'll get to that. Number 1, write down every idea you have. It should be 10, 20 pages, total 5, whatever. You're young, maybe it's 3. Okay. Now you register it with the Writers Guild of America East, not the West, the East. Why? Because you get 10 years for the price of 5, and writers forget everything. So you protect yourself. Step 3. You share these ideas with 5 to 10 people that really want you to succeed, whose taste you trust, okay? No frenemies, no people that secretly want you to fail, no horrible people, we all know who they are, and we put up with them, and we have dinner with them, and we have epic coffees with them, but we do not want to entrust our lives to them. Okay, then step 4, listen. I'll tell you why. Okay, taste is not the same thing as talent. And if you have a thing over here and you go, okay, let's say this is one idea, and let's say this beautiful book here in my hand is another idea. Sam, by the way, this is your copy. I don't know where you are. Oh yeah, there you are. Okay, so here is this idea, and here's the other idea that she had at the same time. Okay, now, luckily she chose to write this one, okay? But this is what happens. You have this big list of ideas, and everyone says, every writer goes, so many writers go, this is my winner. Oh my God, I love this one. Now what happens is maybe 5 out of 7 people or whatever will say, no, it's this one. I love this one. Why don't you write this one first, okay? And what happens is you're suddenly brought to the idea that's most relatable to other people, that might be most universal, but something else happens for your really smart friends. They go, listen, I don't like this idea, but the father character in this is great. Why don't you make him the father in here? This is great. Suddenly, and the thing that happened with Perks subconsciously is now conscious for me, which is your best stories now have your best characters. And your tragedies are a little more funny, or a little funnier. And your comedies are a little bit more dramatic. And your stories have better, it creates a density. It's like a Rorschach test, okay? It just does this thing. And what happens is, okay, you're 19. How long does it take? You've been working on this thing since middle school. So that, okay, 6 years. Okay, here we go. If it takes you a year to write a book, if it takes you 2 years to write a book, that means, since time is somewhat finite for all of us, we might have 50 things in us, if we're lucky, probably more like 30 or 20. So wouldn't it be great if you could game it somehow to always have the best shot of writing everything, rather than a Dasani bottle? Wouldn't that be so much smarter? And furthermore, since everybody in this room loves books, aren't you all glad that she wrote everything instead of a Dasani bottle? I personally am very glad that George Orwell, who's one of my favorite writers, wrote 1984 and Animal Farm, when, by the way, he wrote a whole lot of other books that I defy anyone in this room to name. I can't name them. And so that means for about 20 years, he didn't quite know what he didn't quite know what he had. He said, I had this 1984. I'm glad he wrote that, because I guarantee that George Orwell was like, well, I could write that 1984 book, but there's also the Dasani one. That's really good. Anyway, the whole point is, use your friends, use your time, use your brains, and write everything.
But not actually, don't actually write everything, because that's plagiarism. Also, I just want to say, Stephen, that weirdly, when you first said write down all your ideas, literally the only thing that came into my head, which is faintly disturbing, was Rosemary's Baby meets The Last Unicorn.
Wow.
Would read.
Yeah.
Oh, and here, one other point, I'm sorry, which is this. Here's the other reason why you write, I want to write my version of The Goonies. You might have this thriller over here that takes place in Washington, D.C., blah, 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 and somebody says, hey, why, I think that's your Goonies idea. And suddenly you create Stranger Things. It's like if you align with the right theme and the right character in the right genre, with the right age and the right thing, click. And we are all better off for it.
Stephen, you just like totally gave this entire room chills, and that was excellent.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
I wish you had told us we should have dressed for church.
That's really fun.
I'm just going to move into the audience.
I think we have time for one more question. I'm sorry. Or can we go longer?
Oh, that side.
Yes.
Hi. So, do you ever have to, this is for everyone, do you ever have to step back and not have as much control as you would like over your movie? And how does that feel to step back?
Yeah, but I mean, you also have to, I mean, I think that goes to listening. I mean, I think, because you also, you have editors, even in books, and, I always say that when you get an editorial letter from your editor, you have to go through the 5 stages of grief, denial, and then rage. Rage is a long one for me. But and you do, you always feel like, and that's the benefit, that's actually one of the hardest things to do, is you have to learn as a writer to listen, but only to the right people. And that's the thing I learned, the only real thing I took away from graduate school, which is not at all necessary for writers, but what I took away was you have to listen, but they have to be people who know what you're trying to do. Because if you listen to everyone, like you were saying when you're writing a second book, I mean, then it becomes not yours, it becomes not your narrative, but the right people will tell you and they will help you and they will think of things you can't, juxtaposition, but it will be hard to hear it, because all the things that push you as a writer are things that are fundamentally pushing you to things that you don't already know how to do. You know what I mean? So it's hard. So yes, you do, but also cultivating and understanding when to let somebody else have control and when to insist that it be you is one of the skills that goes into becoming a good writer,
So I want to get through as many people as possible, so I'm going to play a game that I like to call the Power 2. Here's how it works. Eliza, may I have my phone really quickly? I'm going to set a timer. We're going to do lightning round questions. I'm going to start on this side since I did 2 on this one, and we'll try to get through as many questions and as many answers in 2 minutes. I'm going to set my timer in 1 second. Okay, 1 more second. It's on. Power 2, start.
Did you write Wonder based off of a life-related story, I guess?
Yes. Well, not really, and yes. I was inspired to write it after a very brief encounter with a girl who had a craniofacial difference at an ice cream store. It was a scene that I wrote in the book from Jack Will's perspective when he first sees Augie in front of the ice cream store. And but I had no experience, nor did I know anybody in terms of having meaningful relationships with anybody who had a craniofacial difference. It was literally the idea being sparked by this encounter, and then wondering simply what it must be like to face a world every day that doesn't know how to face you back.
Next question.
Okay, so I was just wondering if watching the book that you created be adapted into a film changes the original vision that you had of the book.
I mean, like I said before, I think one of the nice things is that it's a new piece of art, so you can appreciate it that way. I mean, and if you get very lucky and you like the thing that it is, then, like for me right now, there are 2 stories about Maddie and Ollie in the world, and that's really lovely.
Yes. Next question.
Okay, so this is for Wonder, but it applies to both of you. You both mentioned a need to make sure the audience or reader is not aware of the physical description, either for Augie or Perks. What was that like transitioning to film where visuals are necessary?
I would say that that was the hardest part, and maybe one of the reasons it took 4 years to start getting this movie into production. We had, there was a lot of discussion about how to portray Augie. We interviewed and we auditioned children who had craniofacial differences, who came with a whole series of their own challenges, you know, and finding that one boy in the world who is the right age, who has the right craniofacial difference, who is physically able to articulate and read and you know, be heard, and who has parents who would be willing to let him not only film a movie, but then do all the stuff and publicity and all the crazy stuff that happens after the movie happens. You know, it's not like this huge range of people. So we decided at a certain point that makeup really was the way to go, and I was the last person to be on board with that decision. Now I couldn't imagine having done it any other way, but that's really hard, because I think everyone with Wonder, with Augie, everyone has their own idea of what he looks like, and we had to make a choice, and I think we made the right choice.